So tonight we are going to hear from a first-time author who accomplished what most would consider nearly impossible. Rhiannon Navin told her story through the voice, eyes, and emotions of a 6-year-old boy named Zach Taylor. When people ask me what is Only Child about, frankly, I hesitated. Why? Because it's hard to explain that a book based on a school shooting isn't really about a school shooting at all. It's about innocence, forgiveness, courage, and blind faith, as explained by Zach based on his 6 years of life experience. It's raw, it's real, it's captivating, from the first paragraph to the very last sentence. I first heard Rhiannon speak last October at a Meet the Authors event at the Harrison Public Library. What struck me most was her statement that she didn't research or pore over news accounts of Sandy Hook to tell this story, because she didn't want to be perceived as taking advantage of that tragedy. Her disclosure was genuine and honest, and after reading Only Child, it was obvious she did not base her story on facts and as reported by news outlets, but on the facts as reported by an innocent survivor. There is a wonderful quote in the beginning of this book. Sometimes the littlest bodies hold the biggest hearts, and the quietest voices speak the loudest. Once you've read Only Child, you will come to have a greater understanding of and appreciation for what this means, thanks in no small part to Rhiannon Navin and Zach Taylor. Please join me in welcoming Rhiannon Navin.
Hello. How are you? Hi, I'm Rhiannon. I am so thrilled to be here tonight and to get to introduce myself and my book to you tonight. So I live in New Rochelle, right around the corner. I'm a mother of 3, stay-at-home mom. And I was born and raised in a small town called Bremen, which is in northern Germany. I heard somebody whoop. Somebody's from Germany. I grew up in what I like to call a family of book-crazy women. I was raised by a single mom who was a school teacher, who is now came back out of retirement to single-handedly teach every single refugee in Germany, teach them how to speak German and how to develop a love for reading and literature. So my mom really was the most book-crazy woman I've ever met in my entire life. We lived in a small apartment, and literally every wall of our apartment was lined with bookshelves. And there was not, I don't recall a single day where I didn't see my mom with an open book in her hands. I tried to set the same kind of example for my children, which is easy to do because my mom was very successful in instilling that love of reading in me and in my sister as well. And I am extremely fortunate that all 3 of my kids are avid readers and don't have to be poked and prodded to pick up a book and fall in love with a story. So I feel just really, really fortunate that the love for reading seems to be a hereditary thing in my family. As much as I love picking up a book and as much as I love losing myself in a story, I love so much more even watching my children devouring a book and watching how they interpret and figure out a story and generally speaking how they look at the world around them and make sense of it and then sometimes really don't make sense of it at all. So it's just a really grounding experience watching your children kind of go through that and experience that. And it's the consideration of that, my children's voice and their perspective, what ultimately gave voice to my story, Only Child. As did a very personal experience that happened about 3 years ago when, so my twins are now 9, they're in 3rd grade. So I guess it happened 4 years ago at this point. When they first started kindergarten, so they were 5. At Davis Elementary in New Rochelle, They were thrilled to finally be in school, like they've seen their older brother get on the bus, go to school, be a big kid. They were separated for the first time, because that's policy. Twins are not in the same class, so that was a little nerve-wracking at the beginning, but they loved it. They made friends, they loved being in school, they loved, they knew how to read, but they loved just being in that environment that they've seen their brother being for a few years already. And so here they were a few weeks into their first year of school. They were sitting on the rug, separate in different rooms, with their new friends, just all together psyched to be at school, when this voice comes on over the loudspeaker, and it says, "Lockdown." I forgot to prepare them. I forgot to say that to them. I forgot to say there might be a voice on the loudspeaker that says "lockdown." So the teachers went through the whole protocol. They locked the doors, they pulled down the window shades, they turned off the lights, and they, in separate experiences for them. My daughter was instructed to hide in the bathroom, the little bathroom off of the side of her classroom, and my little one, Garrett, was instructed to hide underneath his desk. Well, they came home from school that day and told me all about this experience that they had. Had a lot of questions that I had no answers for. And then a little while later, I found my little guy, Garrett, who's my sensitive one, my little guy, hiding underneath the desk of underneath our dining room table. And I said, "Garrett, what are you doing under the table? Come out from there." And he said, "I'm not coming out, Mama. I'm hiding from the bad guy." And he wouldn't come out. I had to get under that table with him. I had to hold him. I had to try to reassure him, and I had to try to figure out how to make him feel safe when I didn't really know how to do that. Now that was on the heels of Sandy Hook. And during Sandy Hook, we still lived in the city. My oldest, Samuel, who's now a teenager, and it's killing me slowly, but deliberately. He was in first grade, and he was the same age as most of the victims that day. It was December morning. I had to bundle up the twins who were babies, and I dropped him off at school that morning, thinking I was leaving him in a safe place. That day rocked my world, as I know it did every parent's world in America, because from that day on forward, I was living in a place where I wasn't so sure about his safety anymore. We as parents have this long list of fears and worries that keep us up at night. I'm excellent at that, at waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and running through all of the things that could happen to my children. And I never thought that I would have to add my child could get gunned down at school to that list. Shortly after I found my little guy Garrett hiding underneath our dining room table, I started to wonder, what would that look like for him to live through an actual experience? It's not something that I wanted to imagine or picture, but I did. And what would it be like to experience that shooting, and how would he navigate what comes afterwards if he was lucky enough to survive? And so one day I sat down and I wrote the opening scene of Only Child, where this little guy, Zach Taylor, that Joyce mentioned, 6 years old, is hiding in the closet of his first grade classroom with his teacher, with his classmates, while an active shooter is outside in the hallways. He is hiding while the gunman is raging outside, and during the course of his rampage takes 19 lives. This first scene It's the first thing I've ever written in my entire life. And I actually wrote it while I was hiding from my own children at my neighbor's house. And that's because it was one of those rare nights where I actually had a babysitter. My husband and I were going out on date night. It was actually happening. My babysitter arrived before my husband, so I left. And my neighbor wasn't home, so I went to her house. I poured myself a glass of her wine and waited for my husband to arrive. He was late as usual, so I had another glass of wine, and then this first scene just kind of, I don't know how else to describe it, it just kind of fell out of me. And I used a piece of paper that I found and a pen, and I scribbled that down, and it's actually interestingly one of the few scenes that basically was left untouched during the entire editing process. So I'll read to you a little piece of that, if that's okay. She's very sensitive. Okay. And that first scene is called "The Day the Gunman Came." The thing I later remembered about the day the gunman came was my teacher, Miss Russell's breath. It was hot and smelled like coffee. The closet was dark, except for a little light that was coming in through the crack of the door that Miss Russell was holding shut from the inside. "Be completely still, Zach," she whispered. "Don't move." I didn't, even though I was sitting on my left foot and was giving me pins and needles, and it hurt a lot. Miss Russell's coffee breath touched my cheek when she talked, and it bothered me a little. She had to talk to Evangeline and David and Emma a lot behind me in the closet because they were crying and they were not being completely still. "I'm here with you guys," Miss Russell said. "I'm protecting you. Shh, please be quiet." We kept hearing the pop sounds outside and screaming. Pop, pop, pop. It sounded a lot like the Star Wars game I sometimes play on the Xbox. Always 3 pops, and then quiet again. Quiet or screaming. Miss Russell did little jumps when the pop sounds came, and her whispering got faster. "Don't make a sound." Evangeline make hiccuping sounds. Pop hic, pop hic, pop hic. I think someone peed in their underwear because it smelled like that in the closet, like Miss Russell's breath and pee, and like the jackets that were still wet from it when it rained at recess. "Not too much for us to play outside," Mrs. Collaris said. "What, are we made of sugar?" The rain didn't bother us. We played soccer and cops and bad guys, and our hair and jackets got wet. I tried to turn and put my hand up and touch the jackets to see if they were still very wet. "Don't move," Miss Russell whispered to me. My left foot started to hurt a lot, and I tried to pull it out a little, only a little, so Miss Russell wouldn't notice. Pop, pop, pop. It was quiet pop sounds at first. Miss Russell was right in the middle of telling us about what pages in the math book were for classwork and what pages were for homework. The pop sounds made her stop talking, and she made wrinkles on her forehead. She walked over to the classroom door and looked out of the class window. "What the?" she said. We heard sounds coming from the intercom on the wall, and then a voice said, "Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown." It wasn't Mrs. Collaris' voice. When we practiced lockdown drill before, Mrs. Collaris said "lockdown" through the intercom once, but this voice said it a lot of times, fast. Miss Russell's face got whitish, and we stopped laughing because she looked so different and wasn't smiling at all. The way her face looked all of a sudden made me scared, and my breath got stuck in my throat. Miss Russell did a couple of circles by the door like she didn't know where she should walk. Then she stopped doing circles and locked the door and switched the lights off. No sun was coming in from the windows because of the rain, but Miss Russell went to the windows and pulled the shades down anyway. She started talking very fast, and her voice sounded shaky and like squeaky. "Remember what we practiced for the lockdown drill," she said. I remembered that lockdown meant don't go outside like for the fire alarm, but stay inside and out of sight. Pop, pop, pop. Someone outside in the hallway screamed very loud. My legs started shaking around the knees. "Boys and girls, everyone in the closet," Miss Russell said. Miss Russell got everyone in the closet and pulled the door shut. The whole time we could hear the pop sounds. I tried to count them in my head. Pop 1, pop 2, pop 3. My throat felt very dry and scratchy. I really wanted to drink of water. Pop 4, pop 5, pop 6. Please, 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 Miss Russell whispered. And then she talked to God, and she called him, Dear Lord, and I couldn't understand the rest she said because she was whispering so quiet and fast, and I think she only wanted God to hear. So in my story, little Zach and his classmates survived the shooting. They are taken to a nearby church where ultimately he's reunited with his parents. So for 6-year-old Zach, his world is good again. His parents are here, everything's over, they're going to take me home. This weird thing that's just happened is over. Until he realizes that his parents are frantically searching for his older brother, Andy. Eventually, they learn that Andy was one of those 19 lives taken that day. In the aftermath of the shooting, Zach's family and his whole community just kind of quickly unravel. They, especially his parents, they grapple with their grief in very separate and in very all-consuming ways. And his mother goes from being completely grief-struck to pursuing this quest for justice against the shooter's parents. She holds them responsible for their son's actions. Well, in the middle of all that, we have Zach, who's left alone in trying to deal with this trauma that he's just lived through, and his grief, and all the many just really mixed and confusing emotions that a 6-year-old would feel in that situation. And so Zach creates this super secret hideout in his brother's closet, and he uses the resources of a 6-year-old to try to confront and to try to process all these big feelings that he's feeling. He gravitates towards art, and he gravitates towards books to try to help him make sense of this new world that he finds himself in. So I'm going to read you another little passage of my story where he's trying to do just that, and it's called Feelings Pages, and it goes like this. I never knew that you could feel more than one feeling inside of you at the same time, especially feelings that are opposites. I know you can feel excited, but when you do what made you excited, the exciting feeling goes away, and you feel happy because it was fun. Or sad because it's over already, like right after everybody leaves from your birthday party. But more than one feeling at the same time, right next to each other or on top of each other or all mixed up inside of you, I never knew that could happen. But now it happened to me. And it was hard because when you're happy, you want to know that you want to laugh or smile at least. And when you're mad or sad, you want to yell or cry. But when you feel all of those together, then you don't know what you want to do. I walked around the house and I kind of went this way and that way, upstairs and downstairs. And it was like the inside of me couldn't settle down, so the outside of me couldn't settle down either. I walked past the family calendar in the kitchen and it made me stop. It still had all the activities on it from last week. Daddy's row is at the top, then Mommy's, then Andy's, and my row's at the bottom because it goes by age and I'm the youngest. The names were on the calendar in permanent marker. They don't get erased when Mommy erases everything on Sundays to write down the activities for the next week. So now Andy's row was going to be empty. There was going to be an empty row between mine and Mommy's, but his name would still be there, so he was still part of our family, except not really. I stared at Andy's row and what he was supposed to do last week, and he only got to Tuesday, lacrosse, because he died on Wednesday. He didn't get to do soccer on Thursday. For Friday, it said lacrosse game 7 p.m. in his row. I wondered if Andy's team still had the game without him there on Friday. Maybe they got one of the players who normally stands on the side of the field, and he played instead of Andy, and it was like Andy wasn't even missing, and nothing changed. I started to feel mad about that they had their game anyway. Although Andy plays really good and scores a lot of goals, so maybe they didn't win without him. Today was Tuesday, and on Tuesdays I have art at school. I love art, and I'm a really good artist. I was this close to finishing my portrait of Frida Kahlo, and it was starting to look good, like it's one of her own portraits. Frida Kahlo was a famous artist from Mexico we learned about in school. She painted a lot of colorful pictures of herself, and in them, she has really big eyebrows. They meet in the middle, so it's like one long eyebrow, and she has a mustache, but she's a woman. I like to use a lot of different colors too when I paint. I was sad I couldn't go to art today, but I was happy too that there was no school. Sad and happy, see? There's opposites in feelings. Frida Kahlo died a long time ago, and she wasn't old when she died, but she was really sick. I didn't know what type of sick, maybe cancer like Uncle Chip. She painted all the time because of her sickness and because she was lonely in her life. Painting helped her with her feelings. Our art teacher, Mrs. R, told us that. She said art is always about expressing your feelings and is a good way to deal with your feelings. Thinking about what Mrs. R said made me decide to do that too. Make art to deal with my feelings. I went upstairs and got out my big bag of paints. I got my painting paper too and laid it out in my room. Then I sat there for a while, and I didn't know how you make art to deal with your feelings. Maybe paint a picture of myself like Frida Kahlo. I got a cup of water from the kitchen, and Mimi made me promise I wasn't going to make any messes, and I wondered if Frida Kahlo had to try not to make any messes when she was painting too. I dipped my paintbrush into red, which is my favorite color, and I moved the brush up and down on the paper. So it wasn't going to be a picture of myself, but something else my hand decided to make, and I didn't know yet what it was going to be. A line up and a line next to it down, and then up and down again like a long zigzag snake. The red started out really red when I still had a lot of paint on the brush, and then it got like thinner. And when I used up all the paint, in the end it looked like light pink. The way the snake line looked on the paper made me think about the red juice spill on my face after I peed on the mattress. So red looks like an embarrassed feeling. Maybe I could pick one color for all the opposite feelings that were inside me and paint a lot of pieces of paper with only one feeling color. And then the feelings would be separated and not all mixed up together. Red, embarrassed. Put that paper over to the side. I thought about what feeling was next. Sad. Sad was everywhere inside our house, especially where Mommy was. Mommy was so sad, and you could feel it when you got close to her. The closer you went to her, the more you could feel the sad feeling. Mommy cried and cried all the time, and mostly she lay in her bed, and she had big red circles around her eyes from all the crying. I looked at all my paint colors. Sad could be gray. Gray like the sky outside and like the rain clouds. I washed my paintbrush and my water glass, and no water splashed on the carpet, and I painted gray all over a new piece of paper. Sad piece of paper next to the embarrassed piece of paper. Scared. I was having a lot of scared feelings now all the time, definitely black. That's how everything looked in the closet at school. Black, almost no light to see the other colors. And everything is black at night when I wake up and I think the gunman is coming back, except it's always just a dream. I made a black paper, and all black really did look scary. I had to find a color for mad, too. Mad, angry. That's a feeling you have to use your words for, Mommy says, not your hands, like for hitting. I'm mad at the gunman, I said. I thought mad, angry had to be green. Green because of the Hulk. The Hulk starts out like a regular person with beige skin, but when he gets mad, he turns green all over, even his face. When the Hulk gets mad, he gets really mad. And he gets bigger with muscles all over, and he gets super strong. and green all over for some reason. So the color green reminds me of mad, angry. And I made a green page and I put it next to the other feelings pages. Okay, so far, red, embarrassed, gray, sad, black, scared, green, mad, angry. And what color is for lonely? I thought that lonely had to be like a see-through color, so no color at all. Because when you're lonely, it's like you're invisible from other people. But not invisible in a good way, like a superhero, but in a sad way. But if the piece of paper is white, how do you make a see-through color on a white page? Then I had an idea for that. I got out my scissors and I cut out the middle of the paper so there was like a picture frame around a rectangle of see-through nothingness in the middle. Lonely, see-through. I thought I was also feeling happy. I felt happy that I didn't die from the gunman. And I was a little happy because Andy wasn't here anymore to be mean to me. And I could have my secret hideout in his closet now, and he couldn't tell me to get out. In the hideout, I felt good, happy. What color is for happy? Yellow. Yellow like the sun in the sky. A warm yellow sun and a pretty blue sky in the summertime, not the gray, sad sky we had right now. Red, embarrassed, gray, sad, black, scared, green, mad, angry, lonely, see-through, yellow, happy. I waited for my feelings pages to dry, and then I went and got tape from the kitchen and hung them up on the wall inside my hideout. That was a good spot for them. I could lie down on Andy's sleeping bag and look at the feelings. Now they were separated, and that made it easier to think about them. I am heartbroken that my children are growing up in a world where they have to learn how to hide from the bad guys. I wrote this story out of fear and all these worries that I had for them. And my hope was to try to highlight the kind of devastating effect that a horrific crime like a school shooting has, not only on the victims, but also on those who are left behind, the family and the friends and the siblings. And I don't want any other child, not mine, not my neighbors, not the children across the town from me or across the country from me, to ever have to live through something like Sandy Hook or Parkland or any of the other many examples that I could give. So I wrote this out of fear and worry, but I also wrote it with a great deal of hope, because it's ultimately little Zach, with, as Joy said, his whole 6 years of life experience, he's the one who, with this incredible honesty that he has and his optimism and this stubbornness, who manages to lead his family and his entire community, who's so devastated and fractured and not together after that, towards a path towards compassion and healing and coming together. And what I realized while writing the story is this, and it was a great reminder for myself as a mother of 3 children, who's always, rushing and trying to get kids from A to B. And as you know, you're German and you have to be on time, and it's very inconvenient. It's very inconvenient when your children are having big emotions, and you really do have to be on time. And someone's on the floor and having a big emotion. It's very inconvenient. But writing the story really reminded me how important it is to slow down and to listen to the wisdom that they have and to be in the moment. And Zach taught me that a little bit, that we always think of ourselves as adults as being the ones who kind of show our kids how this world works, where I realized or reminded myself I would do really well to pause and let them show me the way every once in a while, or more than every once in a while. And that's how the story came together, and that's what the story did for me, and that was my hope in the story when we brought it out and had you all read it. So I got really quickly very obsessed with writing the story, because it just kind of, I don't know, I always thought when I read, Stephen King's On Writing and those kind of the story's already waiting for you, you just have to unearth it, and I always thought, well, it kind of did happen that way for me, and I just kept kind of, all longhand, by the way, just scribble and scribble and scribble that story. Meanwhile, I had laundry piling up on this side and dirty dishes piling up on that side, because all of a sudden, after all this time of I'm not saying just taking care of my kids, but taking care of my kids, I found this thing that came just at the right time, and I really just wanted to do it. But I did eventually stop and think, well, am I just kind of kidding myself? But I have to say, though, I didn't start writing it with, that was the beautiful thing about it, I didn't start writing it with the goal of publishing. I never wrote it with the goal of showing it to anybody. It was just kind of a thing that happened. And the more time I invested, the more people said, well, can I see it? Can I read it? So eventually I did stop, and I did think, well, I should, since I've never written anything in my entire life, maybe I should find some kind of sounding board, and what would that sounding board look like? And I was very, very lucky to find this amazing writing coach, and the way I found her and selected her is because she calls herself the unkind editor, which I thought, wow, that's perfect, because I just need someone to tell me either, you're kidding yourself and maybe go back to the dirty laundry pile over here, or keep going. Well, thankfully she said keep going. And she is a very experienced writer and editor, and she taught me a lot. She taught me a lot about how do you structure a story, how do you bring all that great stuff that's kind of pouring out of you, and how do you bring it together and actually make it a story. And we did that. It took about, I wrote this whole thing in about a year, and then when it was time, she was also, because she just knows the industry so well, she was also really great in coaching me on how this is how you go out and try to have it represented. So again, being German as I am, I had a whole Excel sheet of agents listed by the priorities and all that stuff. And the first agent, who was kind of my dream agent, I sent this to, said, no pun intended, I'm going to shoot myself if I don't get to represent this book. And he wanted it, and he wanted to, he was so excited about it that I didn't look any further. So there I had an agent, we did a little bit of editing, and he went out on submission with it. And within 2 weeks, he had it sold in 20 countries. So it was, I'm joking, but not really, when I say that future me and very much current me is always going to be very jealous of that me, because that is never ever going to happen again. It's certainly not happening right now with book number 2. So, but that's my first experience with this story was very surreal and very quick like that. I didn't know very much at all in the beginning. When I could only picture, excuse me, my Garrett in the closet of his school, and I could only imagine everything that he would feel and go through in that moment. That's the only thing I knew when I started that story, and kind of everything else came after that. And it kind of surprised me. A lot of things surprised me along the way. Yeah, it was this, I think the single most surprising thing about writing the story was discovering who the shooter was, and then discovering how much empathy I felt for the shooter's family, because I realized that in all the many shootings that I've heard about and that I've on TV, and Adam Lanza in Sandy Hook, and all these other, usually really young men. I realized that I've never given much thought to where he came from and who his parents are. But when I started writing that story, I was surprised by how much empathy I felt for them, and I realized that that the only thing worse that I could imagine than being my own child being gunned down at school would be my child doing the shooting. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm wondering, do you picture, or as I do, especially when I heard you reread the first part of the book, the closet is almost like a character in the book. I mean, it starts with him hiding in the closet. Then he goes to the closet to find refuge in Andy's bedroom. And then the father comes into the closet. And then in the end, it's like the whole family comes back together. Like the closet is a very big part of the book for me, as I think about it. Did you have that same feeling, or it was just it happened organically?
Before I answer that question, by the way, can everybody hear the questions, or should I? No. Okay. So the question was, the closet seemed to have played a big role in the story. It was where he found himself in the very beginning when the shooting happened. It's where he found refuge during his kind of healing journey, and it's kind of in the end where the whole story came back together. And the question was that intentional, or was that something that happened organically? I can only say that almost everything in the story happened organically, because I didn't know how to structure a story or how to plan ahead a story or anything like that. What happened while writing the story is I pictured my own family, and which was an awful thing to do most of the time. And I looked at my family and what was important to my children, and what spaces are they utilizing for themselves. And closets, for some reason, played a huge role in my children's life. They're now out of the closet. No, I'm kidding. My son Garrett, again, who's, I always say he's my sensitive one. My son Garrett was born with a very severe birth defect, and he's had a lot of surgeries and a lot of trauma happening to him in his life. He spent a lot of time in his closet. And he had glowing stars put up in his closet, and it just seemed to be a place for him where maybe it's because of this tight space, where he just felt very secure and very safe. I don't know if it's I'm probably overinterpreting a womb thing. I don't know. But at the time, as I was writing the book, he spent a lot of time in his closet. I spent a lot of time with him in that closet. So it occurred to me at the time that it would be kind of a natural place where he would go if he were to go through what Zach is going through. And unfortunately, during those awful events at school, the kids do often find their refuge inside of that closet, which is often too small to hold everybody and all that. But organically is how most of this story came together. There was a lot of intention there in the beginning. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting too, the story unfolded with, life wasn't perfect for the Taylor family before this happened. And it obviously wasn't perfect, after the fact. And how that, some of those, I was surprised by some of the things that came out in the story, the infidelity, the mother becoming like a crusader, it was almost like her career to go be on television and be interviewed and all those things. So tell me how again, I know it's organic, but I mean, those parts of the story sort of took a path but they all came back together, but yet at the same time, I was almost surprised as I was reading them, and it kept the interest. So how did you come up with those kind of storylines that intertwine back to the main characters?
So the question was, why was the Taylor family not portrayed as, necessarily a perfect family? Why were why was there infidelity? Why was the mother Why did she have such an extreme reaction? What was the purpose behind that? I do have to say there was a little purpose in that. Once I started thinking a little bit about my characters, and the purpose was, the intention was, that I didn't want to kind of pitch good versus evil. That was the two answers to that question. So I didn't want to pitch good versus evil. There wasn't just the family of victims and the evil perpetrator, which again comes back to kind of what I was saying. There's so much empathy that I've also felt for the shooter's family, because so much has to happen to a young man for him to go off the deep end like that. The second part of that for me was that it was really important for me to show this was a normal, average family. Like every family that I know. They were all complicated, flawed people, like every person that I know. So, so being married is really hard under the best of circumstances for me, anyway. Being a mother is the hardest thing raising children is the hardest thing that I've ever done, especially when you throw in a kid like Andy, Zach's older brother, who has behavioral issues. So this is a family who's already dealing with all the kind of day-to-day things that a family has to deal with, and they're already struggling. So the affair, while hopefully not every family experiences that, is a symptom of this family kind of just trying to make it from day to day. They're struggling, they're trying to figure it out as a family, and then bam, this kind of unthinkable thing happens to them. And then how does this average family with already flawed people handle such a situation? Because that's real life, right? So if that were to happen to my family, we're not all superheroes coming into this, innocent superheroes coming into this situation, although obviously innocent, that's when it comes to that. But we're already dealing with all these things already, and then this unthinkable thing happens to you, and then you as a flawed person, how do you deal with that? And a lot of people were very mad at me about that affair. I mean, I got a lot of flack for that. But I stand by it, because it's so the marriage was struggling. A lot of marriages are that way. And then your son is taken in such a violent, extreme way. So how does your struggling marriage deal with that? How do they cover that? So a little bit of my intention was, these are all normal, regular day people, including the shooter's family. And how in this extreme situation do they try to cope? Any other questions? Yes?
You said that this has been published in 20 different countries. Mm-hmm. So have you done a book tour, or have you gone to some of these other countries, had discussions like this? And what kind of effect? And I asked you that question because the shooting is such an American phenomenon. Yeah. And I know especially European countries look at this with absolute horror and fascination.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. I went to a few other countries as part of my book tour, and the first one was the UK. And that was actually my first leg because the UK book came out before the US book. So they tossed me right into the boiling water and like, you go deal with that kind of conversation that you're going to have over there. And it was it was a difficult, a much more difficult conversation to be had over there because of what you just said. And it's, by the way, my book is doing really well in all the countries that don't have mass shootings. Here, it's doing okay, which is not surprising. But the conversations were different. And the most memorable conversation I had was only actually just a few weeks ago with a class of 9th graders in Germany, where my book is not even out in Germany yet. In Germany in high school you pick kind of majors, and they were an English major class, and they chose my book for their semester study, which was just one of the coolest things that happened to me in relation to this book. And they did really interesting work around my story for a whole semester, and then I did a Skype call with these kids. And they each had their questions prepared, and they sat down in front of the computer and they asked the question. They were all really nervous, and I was really nervous. And then a girl sits down, 15 years old, and she says, "So, how come you're raising your children in America if you know that they could be gunned down there, where you could raise them here in Germany, since you're German, and they wouldn't have to be exposed to that?" Yeah. Very good question. You know, and it was a long-winded answer where all the things that I love about America, and then my husband can't work in Germany and all that. But it's an interesting question. So I had very different and very challenging conversations kind of overseas. A lot of interviews with The Guardian, and then welcome. Hello. And the only other thing that I will mention in answering your question is that the only kind of negative review I received was in the Irish Times by John Boyd, author of A Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And John Boyd called me a coward. And he said that I had an opportunity to take a stand on gun control, and I failed to take it. I never had the chance to reply to him directly, but I think that what I would have said to him is that I think you, John Boyd, don't understand American society that much, or the issue of gun control within American society, because if I had done what you said, if I had hopped on my soapbox and if I had shouted out my personal views on gun control, then guess who wouldn't have listened to me? The people that I was trying to reach. You know, and I would have said to him, I think that my entire book is a stand on gun control, but I can't. It's not a way to reach the people that I want to reach. So if I have a chance to meet John Boyd, author of the most overrated book in the world, then I will tell him then I would tell him this answer. I think that trying to show the experience of a 6-year-old is something that everybody can get behind, no matter what end of the spectrum you're on. You will feel for the boy. There will be empathy for the boy, and I think that might be a better way to try to get at people than saying, ban all guns. So, but yes, very different conversations in different countries, very challenging at times, but good conversations and good way to raise awareness. Any other questions? Yes. So my unkind editor, and when we're at a time, we reached a point where she said, it's time for you to show this to a few people. She said, find a reader that you know is going to be very kind and supportive, and find a reader who is going to be really critical. One of my kind and supportive readers is sitting right here, one of my first beta readers, one of my very best friends. And as my very critical reader, I chose my mom. My mom didn't want to read it because she was terrified that she'd have to tell me that it sucks. Because she had no reason to believe that it wouldn't suck, because I'd never written anything in my entire life. So she said, who are you to? Well, I finally made her read it. And she said that about halfway through she started crying, only because she realized she wouldn't have to tell me that it sucks. So she just made my German publisher hate me, because she redid the translation. She's a translator also, so she just wouldn't let that one go. she's a huge supporter and very proud. So, and my book is dedicated to her, of course.
Did you ever get to a point while writing the book, gee, how am I going to end this? Or what's the outcome? Or are they going to heal? Are they going to split for good? How's this little boy going to mentally survive everything? Did you have a good focus on what you were going to do, say in the middle of the book, as you were writing, how you were going to tie it all up at the end?
I'm sorry, I forgot to repeat the questions before this, so I apologize up there. But so the question was, did I have a good idea of what the ending was going to be? How was I going to wrap everything up? How was the family coming back together or not coming back together? How was the boy going to survive? So the ending was actually the only thing that my agent, my editor, and I fiercely disagreed on. And I was very lucky that, because I'm a first-time author, that I got as much say in the editing process as I did. Thankfully, they did value my opinion. And because they wanted the ending to be a lot more kind of tied up, wrapped in a bow in the end than I envisioned it. So the ending that you read is a little bit of a compromise, but not by much. I did kind of envision where it was going. Although there wasn't much planning, I did realize that there was obviously not going to be a happy ending. Although it ended up being one in as much as it possibly could be. But you weren't going to walk away thinking everything is good, because how could it be? So yes, I mean, I think I knew where I was heading. I knew that, it would be the boy who would be the one who kind of manages to bring his family back together. And I still don't know if the parents made it or if they're going to make it. But I knew that I got them into a place where I could just kind of let them figure it out on their own from there. And I kind of did know that I would end up in the place where it would feel that, okay, I can just let them go from here. Why did I kill off Nancy? The mistress. Why did I kill her off? Because I wanted, so the different way that everybody in my story dealt with their grief was really fascinating to me, and Nancy was the extreme end of the spectrum of how do you deal with your grief. She was so on her own, and she lost her sole purpose for living. And for her, I didn't see another way, because what I had to do while writing the story was put myself into the mom's shoes. And I got a lot of heat for the character of the mom, even more than for the affair. So much. People were very upset with me about the mom. But Nancy's also a mom, right? So I would be in Zach's mom's position. I have other children. So I would have to figure out a way to go on. But if I was a mom of one child and that child was gone, I 100% see myself the way going where Nancy went. No doubt. I mean, who knows? Once you're tossed in that situation, who knows how it would end. But if I didn't have any children that I would have to try to keep my head up for, I don't think so. So that seemed like a natural way for her to go. And even, I know it almost felt like a good way for her to go for me.
Of course, you could make an argument that she was a sperm lover.
That she was the sperm lover?
Sperm lover.
Oh, sperm lover?
Yes, and she saw that crashing down on her too.
Potentially. Yeah, I like the way you think. No, that's yes. Yes.
When Zach's mom invited the survivors to Thanksgiving dinner, did she know about the affair?
So the question was when Zach's mom forge a relationship with the woman that her husband had an affair with? Did she know, or the other survivors' parents, did she know that there was the affair? I think that she knew there was an affair. Because her reaction then at Thanksgiving dinner when she found out was kind of like, ugh, of course, it was her. So you know, I think it was another, her knowing that there being an affair, and her knowing that there was an affair was just kind of a symptom of their marriage that was struggling and that was failing. And I think it almost became inconsequential when this other thing happened to them. The affair wasn't important anymore because, you know, her son was gone. And maybe she was also at a point in her relationship where it didn't matter anymore anyway. I don't know, you know. But yeah, she was aware there was something going on, and obviously wasn't aware who it was until the police officer kind of laid it out for her, or until Nancy's letter revealed it.
What was your educational focus before you ever got married and had kids? Because you said you never thought about writing, so what was your background?
My background was in marketing and advertising. So I went to school in Germany. I worked for an agency in Düsseldorf in Germany, and then I was transferred to the same agency, Gray Advertising, in New York. And I was transferred here for a 3-month project. I was supposed to get this project done and then go back home. And well, the first week I moved here, I met my now husband, and I never went back. And my mom really, really tries to like my husband a lot, but you know, it's his fault that I stayed. Yeah, marketing and advertising, which bored me to tears. I was on the account side, not on the creative side. So I was on the side that both clients and creatives hate, and it was all a nightmare. So, as much as I felt very, very fortunate to be able to stay home with my children, I didn't take that for granted, that opportunity. I also struggled through a lot of it because, like I said, one of my children had a birth defect, and mom was all I was, and this writing thing came around at just the right time where I was really struggling. I was really trying to figure out, what do I do and where do I go from here? And then I fell in love with this crazy thing, and I hope I get to do it again. So, thank you. Thank you so much.
Wamras Books is here outside with books to sell, and Rhiannon will be signing them as well. So we ask you, and we also have some cookies and coffee outside, so help yourselves.